Hello, I'm Earl Weinberg, and this is Book Circle Presents Tales of the Dagda. Tonight, we're going to continue our reading of The Good Day. Heracles and Hephaestus did not wait, but took bowls, filled them, and sat. But they did not speak, watching Athena instead. Athena sat and ate for a while, then began, "Our troubles run all through our history, but I do not know that history clearly. We are a quarrelsome family, and each generation passed down little truth to the next, leaving them to fend and discover for themselves." She waved her hand upward. "Above the air is a realm of invisible fire, inhabited by daemons. Beyond that, behind the sky and all appearances, are powers. Sometimes they act in the world, but seldom directly. They raised up my family among the daemons and wove into each of us threads of their own strength, each of different qualities. How my family were supposed to run the world, I do not know. Instead, they quarreled with one another and with the other creatures. At length, we held this part of the world, but with enemies on every side. Storm and fire giants to the north, animal powers to the south, dragons to the east. Only your lands, the empty lands to the west, were quiet then. Between the wars and after the wars, we ruled, setting up cities for our kin the daemons, whom we taught to live on earth, and for tame mortals. You fays, with the wild mortals and some folk of the animal powers, wandered in the wilderness. Except for the nymphs and Curetes we took in service, we let you wild folk be, and you let us be, and that was good. Then the last war came on us from the least likely quarter, the Western dragons. They must have prepared for ages. They raised up Typhon. He was a dragon to begin with, I suppose, but added to and enchanted and spun through with stolen threads of such mantles as you took, taken from the eldest fallen gods, I think, perhaps with their collusion. In the end, he was more spirit than beast, more beast than person. We won, you could say. Typhon is dead, and before he died, more completely destroyed than any soul I have seen pass into the dark. The Western dragons are downfallen, few in number, cursed to become fewer, seldom able to speak or think, dying without issue. But we lost too. We only lost more slowly. You beheld our powers as threads of qualities woven into great mantles of godhood. The war was one of threads against threads, each side joining all their strengths together. The dragons put almost everything into Typhon. We killed him, but he poisoned us, tore out the tendons of our strength. It was long before we knew we were dying, but we know it now. Zeus died straight from Typhon's venom, even if he lingered. Though he never stopped the round of the lullaby, the Dagda watched as Hephaestus gestured at the side of the cauldron. Something formed in the reflections on the side. A serpent gliding through a mountain range, as big as the mountains. It reared and spat black venom on a man, mountain high, who threw gouts of blue fire into the serpent mouth. It shuddered, writhed, and died. The man turned away, staggered 9 or 10 steps, then fell and was still. The Dagda remembered Athena's words about a war of pure qualities and decided Hephaestus' images were dream or symbol. After all, Clotho had said Zeus took generations to die. Athena had spoken sadly but steadily, but now she shuddered. When he died, his body, he had taken so many forms, a man, a bull, a swan, a pillar of fire, a shower of sunlit rain, so often just lightning. At the end, why? His body dissolved into ants, a vast swarm of ants. Why? Hephaestus lowered his head and his hands. The reflections showed nothing. We thought we were immortal. We thought our powers made us deathless. After Zeus, we knew otherwise, and so did our enemies. The dragons were gone, but there were the giants in the north, our hateful kin. They came. Poseidon felt himself ailing. While strength lasted, he rode against the giants. Hephaestus gestured again. In the reflections, the Dagda saw a great white horse leap out of the sea. A man with a three-pointed spear jumped on its back and rode up against three giants, tree-tall women composed of snakes. The vision dimmed. He won. He died. Ares and Hermes did the same. Two men, cloaked in silver and red, fought with spears and swords against a wolf that kept changing size, now big as a horse, now big as a hill. They changed with it. It savaged them. It took 2 tries, said Athena, and the Dagda saw the two men talking earnestly around a fire. Silver Cloak had a bloody bandage over one eye. Red Cloak's right arm ended in a rag-wrapped stump. Then the two of them were at the wolf again, only it was smaller, tired, as were they. But they did the same, won and died. The giants retreated, but I would not ignore them, Fey man. They are not far from your home. So we had won, in a way, but we were still sickening. Hades tried to cure himself. We thought he might know how, if anyone did. The reflections showed a man and a woman in a glade, clad in black, their faces somber. He said he would sleep, rest, and return refreshed in the spring. The man raised his arms and became a hemlock tree. Many branches were bare. But he never woke. The picture shifted. The glade had late patches of snow in it. The woman in black knelt, weeping, at the foot of the leafless tree. Persephone went mad, dancing and raving and casting death. When any of the daemons of their court tried to soothe her or stop her, she turned them into flowers or snakes or just killed them. The woman whirled through night, eyes flashing. She wore necklaces of serpents and blossoms and skulls. I hope she is dead by now. I think she must be. Athena looked up and sighed. Hephaestus lowered his hands and let the pictures vanish. A few of us remain. Apollo is out there seeking to cure himself and seeking our father's mantle. Busy man. Busy running, too, since a wolf giant has sworn to track him down and eat him. We shall see. The Dagda went on playing. I hope to die a quiet death, Athena said. But first, and more importantly, I hope to do a little good, such as I hope I did you. The Dagda played on. Giving away threads of your family's mantles? Certainly it did me good, lady. She nodded. I have some ideas, and now I think we can escape and act on them. Go north, I think, and raise up some powers against the giants to keep them busy. Go south. The animal folk of the desert allied with us at the end against Tiphon. They are fairly decent. I should reward that. Maybe seek out the southern and eastern dragons. They were very different from the western. Then she fell silent and stared at the flames. Can your kind truly sleep, lady? The Dagda asked. Then sleep and grow strong. You and the two lords, all of you. He played on and played on. After a while, the folk around him marveled that he continued so long. Then they marveled that the clouds below the fort never moved, nor did the sun. All ate and rested several times. He played on. The foemen below, running through the forest or blundering out of the landslide, never noticed the long rest. They noticed instead the monster that dived down from the fort. It stooped hawkwise on great wings, landed, and began to lay about with a great club. It stood like a man, but was furred and clawed like a bear. It had a head like a boar, and antlers like a stag. It used horn and tusk, claw and club, and it flew everywhere as lightly as a dragonfly. And all the time it laughed like a young man. They fled and never saw when the fort was emptied. Some years later, in Ireland, the Dagda sat on the low green hill that was his home, the club beside him as always, the harp ready to his hand. His folk were gathered around him, gossiping and singing. It was an easy summer day at court. A man came limping up to him. It was Hephaestus, still strong but moving slowly, with his limp and a heavy pack of tools on his back. He bowed to the Dagda and said, My lady returns this to you. She and her folk no longer need it, but you, we know, can make use of it. He handed the Dagda a little bronze trinket the size of an acorn. The Dagda smiled, set it on the ground, and pulled apart his hands. The little bronze acorn grew and became the cauldron, already full and steaming. He waved his spoke over and told Hephaestus, "Sit and be welcome, and tell me your tale." With a sigh, Hephaestus sat at the Dagda's feet. The second Zeus won, or at least he now holds Olympus, though he found it bare of mantles. He and his court take the names and claim the powers as best they can. I do not see him lasting long. Apollo still contests the new Zeus, but lately he has retreated north, followed by that wolf. My lady went north too, and south and east. Her plan of building up the best of the new gods came to little. We were late to the spoils. Those ragged mantles had already been plucked by the folk we found, save the animal powers in the southern desert. Those she rewarded, as she told you. For the rest, they had already taken as much as they could weave into their own souls, as much or more. Not all were as wise as you, Dagda. Some of the new gods are mad. Good that they are weaker than the old ones. He paused to see if his host would take offense at being called weak, but the Dagda only nodded. Perhaps they raided derelict Olympus, Hephaestus mused. Perhaps they robbed the ailing old gods or made trades with them. Perhaps other old gods had their own plans of building up allies. She's taking the remains of the mantles through a passage beyond the sky with no plan but to be wise. Perhaps she will trade them for a quiet place to die. Perhaps she will simply destroy them. Please do not ask me her path. No more I will. And what of Clotho and her sisters? They go with her. And Heracles? He died in the east, fighting monsters. And what of you? The old god sighed. Sir, I do not know. I am weary. May I rest here while I decide? You may rest or you may stay, as you choose. The Dagda looked around his gathered court. Ladies and lords, this is Hephaestus of the old gods. He is my guest and free of this court. Thank you, sir, said Hephaestus. But though I came from the old gods, I was never of their kind. More honest, I think, to use one of the names I took on my journey here. You and your folk may have heard of me already as Wayland the Smith. Then you shall be Wayland among us. And he brings us a great gift, the Dagda announced to the court, which he had a hand in making. This cauldron is ever full, and no one need come away from it unsatisfied. And that is how the Dagda got his three great treasures of harp and club and cauldron, and what is more, the threefold strength to be the king of the Tuatha de Danann. Danu. The river ran through an oak wood. It was only a cubit deep at the deepest here, and a few arm spans wide. The wood was not very thick either. The sun struck through in dapples, but there was a wide sandy patch on the bank, and the man had played here often when he was small. The man looked young, tall and sturdy, sun-browned as they reckoned it in these northern lands, with curly black hair and beard. He wore only a kind of leather tabard, figured at the hems and belted with figured leather. Underneath swirled spiral patterns in dark blue woad. The next century, when they started numbering, would call this time the 5th century, but already this style was immensely old. On his shoulder he carried a club, an oak beam longer than his leg and barely shaped by hands. The tip was capped with a small bronze cauldron. He stepped down to the sandy patch and looked about. Mother? While he listened to the water, he twirled the club as lightly as if it had been a willow wand and caught the cauldron as it flew off. He laid down club and cauldron, then sat cross-legged. Mother? He spoke no louder, but this time put some strength in the word. He listened again and smiled. She was here now. After several breaths, he heard in the lapping of the water, Hello, child. There was no voice to hear. The lapping did not become articulate, but now it meant that. Mother, I've come for a talk. I'm sorry it's been so long. You reckon time like your father. The rippling expressed amusement. The stars have not moved. The sun has not changed color. The day is the same length. It is not a long time. Of course, Mother's perspective would be different. Well, I'm glad then. I've come to ask you about this man, Patrick. Have you heard of him? People talk by the water. I have walked abroad. So, yes, apparently. Well, he just sent the Slua Nathir packing. After all these centuries, who couldn't root him out, and he just goes to their stronghold, gives them a dressing down in Latin, and the serpent host is gone. Made for some good looting afterwards, if you were careful. So, what do you make of him? What do you make of him? Right, forthcoming as always. What do you know of his god? Silence. Either she knew nothing of the subject, which was unlikely, or she did not want to talk about it. He serves the god the Aesir call the White Christ, he told her, just in case. When the Romans were in Britain, I walked there and heard he was the son in a family with his father and their spirit, and they were said to have made the world. Like Odin, Vili, and Ve. A bit like, but starting even further back. Patrick preaches the same, and he wants the mortals to change their worship. He wants them for his Christ alone. Yes, Kelty and Oshin have come to him to argue about it. They've made friends with him while they argue and go about with him. The meantime, he goes on preaching, and now there's this feat with the Slua Nathir. I don't miss the worms, but he says they were demons or obeyed some. If there's a power like his in the land, I need to know about him. I recall the talk of demons and angels in Roman Britain, and I've wondered. He took a deep breath. Mother, are you an angel? Angel, an Achaean word for messenger, servant. I was never a servant. Scorn. No, I suppose not. Well then, this Christ and his father. Mother, who is your father? The water only made water noises. No answer. She had always turned away questions about her origin with silence or reproof or departure. Mother, who is my grandfather? Meal, son of Bile, son of Breogan, son of Brath. Expressionless, as flat as writing on a page. On your side, as you know I mean. After another silence, I arose from a source. He decided he could be silent too and waited. Along with many others. I have uncles and aunts, cousins, if you like. And this source is my grand. Give her another silence to fill. A source of. The source of all else. Is this the Father of Christ, the God of the Jews and Christians? I have not looked into it. You have not wanted to, it seems, he reflected. Is the Spirit my grandmother? It is not a relationship of flesh. It is all older than flesh, older than the sky from before the world. Father is just the best word. Knows a lot about it for not having looked into it. A father with no mother? Curious. Why? The water trickled, babbled. The meaning flowed as readily. He had allowed her to change the subject from her own history. Bring the shy horse up to the jump slowly, Rhiannon would tell him. For a human body to become a father needs only pleasure and waiting. Becoming a mother costs pain and danger, costs of your substance. The source creates in joy unalloyed, is not pained or threatened or diminished. There are pains later, he said softly, that fathers and mothers share. The water music brought no meaning. Does pain lie between the two of you? The longest silence yet. This is hard for me to say. Then tell me of you and my father and my own birth. He stretched out on the sand as he had done when small, sometimes with his head in her lap when she was there that way, sometimes as now, propped up on one elbow, listening to the water. You know all that tale. Tell it again anyway, he coaxed. Let the shy horse take another pass at the jump. We had the best of it at first, raising storms against the sons of meal and killing your uncles with sword and spell, she said, nearly recited. There was no hint of anger or remorse. It was all just matter of fact to both of them. But then your father sang his terrible spells, even mortal as he was then, and knotted all our magic against him and his, and the battles went back and forth, and they won. Your father's folk won fair and square and were good victors, not gloating or malicious. So I thought, this is not too bad and can be made better. What if there were not two clans but one? So I went to treat with him and your uncles and aunts as to how we should all get along going forward. And I offered them the hospitality of our halls in the other world, and the awe of them took the edge off their arrogance. And I saw your father was torn. He had lost brothers and other kin, but we were only defending ourselves, and he admired our courage and honor and our beauty and magic. I do not say I played on that, for that sounds like deceit, but I emphasized it. And I admired his courage and honor and the generosity that let him treat so open-handedly with blood foes. I admired that, and his laughter, and his magic art, and the silver tongue he used to sing it. I offered to adopt him into our people, and I offered him the friendship of my thighs. My daughters washed him of his mortality, and his first night immortal, we lay where you lie now, or nearly. There was an oak wood fire and mead. It was a long night, but not long enough. After midnight, we fell asleep in each other. I woke before him and returned to water. He woke when you cried, and he found you were here on the sand. No pain and cost of motherhood for you, then. And as you know, he took you in and raised you up, and you were his shield man, and then his champion, and now his king. Is he in Megmel now? Last I heard. Perhaps I shall visit. So you like it here in these realms? I like it here. What went wrong between you and the source? Another pause, but not so long. It, he demanded of us, of me, us, all of us first spirits. What did he demand? It was different for each, and for each it was too specific to put into words, even into such meanings as I use here. But always it was a demand for love. He demanded you love him? Yes, no. As I said, this is hard to speak of, uttering pain. Please, mother, I must know what Patrick is bringing to my land. Was she ashamed? He had never known her to be ashamed. And I need to know for myself, mother. If he is your source, he is mine too. What is my family history? No reply. Well, he could wait. If need be, he would become an oak or even a boulder, shapes good at waiting. But first, try more talk. Did he bully you? A fine universe that would be. But he had to know. The water noises stopped. He looked up and down the river course, all smooth as glass. It moved, if you looked close, but without waves or ripples. A picture came into his mind of his mother, standing rigid, fists clenched, eyes shut tight to hold out memory or feeling, which of course still soaked through, unstoppable. Mother, please tell me. He took his own pause, then said, I'll do whatever you want, I promise. He felt the chill of exposing his destiny this way. She might want him to sweeten all the sea from here to Spain, or keep summer going for 7 years, or fetch her a herd of the giant elk that had been her favorites and were all dead these many ages. And he would have to see it through or pay the price of failing. Silence and silence. Not a gurgle, not a splash. Let's see. He would root himself over at the edge of the sand where the soil began to be richer. He would lift a head made of arms into the sunlight, and being male and female both at once, mate with the other oaks by insect suitors, and drop acorn grandchildren into their mother's lap until she drop acorn children into their grandmother's lap until she relented. Or just curl up and petrify here and wait her out. The water music began again. Good. He liked being a man. A bit later, she found meanings for the sounds. You see the light on the water here. You hear it flowing. You feel how this place shelters from both heat and cold. You could say here the beauty demands to be recognized. You are at fault if you don't. Or you see a duty plain before you. It demands your obedience. He nodded. So it is an internal demand, the kind that only exists because your heart acknowledges it. You couldn't call that bullying. It was only a demand because you let it be. He made hearts. He made the inside and the out. This was before that border was drawn. He had always known Mother was ancient, but it occurred to him she was always showing new ways in which she was so old. Not all the days and not all the bardic skill of your father could say exactly how the source called to me, what drew me, but I dare say it involves water. Often, a bit of a chuckle. Such demands would be easy to obey. They are your own desires. So you would think. But to answer such calls properly, you must put yourself aside. You must love this unutterable thing more than yourself, or you are not desiring it enough. There are some who would not do that, but the desire did not pass. It never passes, but they will that it would pass. Is this the war in heaven Patrick spoke of? Is this the casus belli, as the Romans say, that Satan and his lot refused to be true to their own heart's desires? This began when there was nothing but ourselves and possibilities, but you can put it that way. And what was your part in the war, Mother? The pause was short this time, then nothing. He looked his puzzlement. I did not fight on either side. I fled. Across a great span of sky and years, I found this world all beautiful with seas and rain and rivers, only to find it was the holding of one of the rebels. But I was enchanted with the place, still am. And the rebel lay low, did nothing, was wounded in the light of his light. So I stayed. And then the war found this place when the rebels began to recover and were besieged. And I learned what home was from having one, and what pain was from seeing the rebels suffer and make suffer, and what grief was when I saw some rebels had been friends. And it is a very long story. She sounded sad and tired. He sat back up and pondered. He would not let himself think the word coward. She had faced pain of hide and heart in many battles and tragedies. He had seen her do it. But this first and ultimate battle must be something else again. Could she be blamed for not facing that? He shied away from answering. But mightn't she have changed in all that time? In all of time? Perhaps the battles and sorrows she had faced since were practice for a rematch. He would not suggest that. Instead, he asked, What do you want, Mother? I promised. Again, the meaning was without mood, like words on paper. Do not come to me again. He bowed his head and felt his eyes sting. Until, and he knew she had seen his tears, I send for you. He raised his face and smiled. And what do you think I should do about Patrick? Why ask me? You will do as you choose. Sulking a bit over fresh bruises, he understood. To be sure, but that doesn't mean I don't value your counsel. You say Oshin and Kealty have made friends with him. Seek them out, and so find him. Befriend him yourself if you can. See how he fights, who comes to help him. Then decide. That's wise. Thank you, Mother. He stood and gathered up the club and called. Please send for me soon. Until then. He marched up the bank into the full light. Soon he was over the near rise across the heather. At the top of the next rise, he paused. He looked around. Omnipresent, they said, so it didn't matter which way you looked. But upward seemed the approved direction. He looked up, past the sun. Grandfather, it's time we talked. The end.